Jeffrey Epstein was an American financier with exceptionally good connections in politics, business, and high society. In public, he long appeared to be a well-connected billionaire. But behind the scenes, he built a system in which young girls were abused and exploited. And what is truly shocking is not only the crime itself, but the question, how could this go on for so long? Let's start at the beginning. For years, Epstein moved in elite circles, organized parties, cultivated relationships with influential people, and presented himself as someone who had access to money, to ideas, to networks. It was precisely this access that became his shield. Because in many systems, the following applies. If someone is rich, if they have powerful contacts, if they can open doors, then some institutions don't look too closely. Or they are thwarted. Or they negotiate deals instead of investigating thoroughly. A crucial point in the Epstein story is that there were early warning signs. Those affected described what had happened. There were clues, reports, investigations. But it took years for serious consequences to ensue. And then a mechanism comes into play that goes far beyond this case. Power produces closeness. Closeness produces loyalty. Loyalty produces silence. This creates protective walls, not necessarily through a single grand conspiracy, but through an interplay of interests, fear, career, influence, and dependence. Another point is that Epstein's system was not just local. There were different locations, different properties, trips, contacts in several countries. When structures operate internationally, but law enforcement and jurisdictions are strongly organized nationally, gaps arise. Gaps in jurisdiction, gaps in information, gaps in enforcement. In 2019, Epstein was arrested again. The allegations were serious. Shortly afterwards, he died in custody. And it was precisely this moment that triggered a new wave worldwide. Not just outrage, but unanswered questions. For with his death, many people were left with the feeling that the central perpetrator was gone. But the system that made him possible remained. In this context, it is also important to note that Ghislaine Maxwell, a close confidant of Epstein, was later convicted in the United States. This shows that the case did not involve just one individual, but an entire environment that was involved or contributed to it. At the same time, much of the speculation on the internet mixes proven facts with allegations, and that is precisely why the real task is so difficult, separating what can be proven from what is merely alleged. If we really want to understand the Epstein case simply, we need a clear picture. A perpetrator uses status and money to gain access. He creates dependencies among those affected and in the environment. He creates a network of silence, intimidation, and influence. Institutions fail, sometimes through overload, sometimes through pressure, sometimes through deals. And the longer it takes, the bigger the protective wall becomes. And now comes the point that is uncomfortable. But important. This case is not just a scandal to be consumed and then dismissed. It is a symptom, a warning sign, because when power, money, and networks are strong enough, they can bend rules, delay processes, and control attention. That's why the real question is not, how sick was this one perpetrator? But rather, what structures allow something like this to happen? And this is precisely where the whole thing takes on a global dimension, because we live in a world where capital, networks, and influence operate without borders, but control, transparency, and enforcement often stop at borders. If global power structures exist, global democratic control structures are also needed, not because it's about Epstein, but because Epstein is just one of many possible symptoms. What does that mean in concrete terms? It means that we need minimum standards that apply everywhere. For transparency, for supervision, for cross-border investigations. We need institutions that are not dependent on individual interests. And we need a debate about a modern global separation of powers. Who controls the controllers when power has become global? This can be formulated as a vision. A democratic world parliament, not as a replacement for states, but as an additional level that intervenes where national systems reach their limits. A subsidiary global constitution that defines minimum rules that no network is allowed to circumvent. and institutions that protect these rules so that cases like this cannot remain under wraps for years. If you are interested in this perspective, not just the scandal but the system behind it, then take a look at my book, The System of the Untouchables: How Power, Money, and Networks Built a Global Protective Wall. It goes through the mechanisms that made this case possible step by step, and what we as a society need to learn from it. That's it for today. If you enjoyed our explainer video, please give us a like and write your thoughts on the Epstein case in the comments. And if you don't want to miss any more explainer videos in the future, please subscribe to our channel. See you next time.